It gives me great pleasure to be here with you. I was just thinking over this in the last few minutes, and it gives me great pleasure for a number of reasons. First of all, this is like a homecoming for me because I am a proud alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad from the class of 1975, actually. I am not quite 100 years old, but I'm older than I look. It's special that we are in the Ravi J. Mathai auditorium. I remember Ravi Mathai well. When I was a student here from 1973 to 75, he was one of my professors. And he was also, I think he had just stepped down as director of IMA. Samuel Paul was the director, but Ravi was still a faculty member, and I remember him very fondly. Amit has asked me in my remarks, which should take me about 30 minutes or so, to focus on the requirement, the need of business schools, aspiring business schools who would like to take the game higher. And I'm very happy to do that. I will, however, end my remarks by addressing that audience, and I have some suggestions which you leaders might want to consider. But I think there are some other pieces of the argument that I would like to lay out before you. I should caution you, those of you that were expecting very colorful slides with very fancy technological transitions. I stopped doing PowerPoint a few years ago. I found that the world has got so jaded with PowerPoint that your message almost completely gets lost. It's an arms race of who has the fancier slides. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like to focus on the content, and if the content that I offer to you today is any good, hopefully that'll remain with you. So I'll just talk about 6 or 7 specific points. It's very good to see Amit and his entrepreneurial efforts in this sector in India. I have been involved with the Asian Management Conclave a couple of times, and I'm sure that those presentations or lectures are somewhere online in websites that Amit controls. And I've enjoyed sharing in Singapore ideas about what's happening in the world of business schools more globally. One quick footnote before I get into the substance of what I'll be talking about. I will tell you that another reason, by the way, it's a pleasure to be here, is to share the stage with Harish Bhatt, my fellow IIMA alum. And in fact, he and I are connected in an indirect way, another interesting way. In 1975, when I left IIMA, I joined the Tata Group, actually, in Bombay, started my career there in Voltas Limited, which is a company that has gone through ups and downs. It's sort of on the up again. But at the time I worked for Voltas, it was one of India's top 10 companies, one of the finest companies. In fact, L&T was a little smaller than Voltas, as I recall, because my office was next to L&T House in Ballard Estate. So it's good to be back with a Tata colleague, and I recently ran into the current chairman of Voltas, and it was good to reminisce about the old times. I have been outside of India. I don't say this so much by way of an apology, because the person that I am today and what I share with you today largely comes from the fact that this is a part of my own life journey. I left India in 1978. I was very privileged to go to Stanford Business School, where I did my PhD and a master's, then taught at University of Toronto for some years. It's called the Harvard of the North. Then came back to the US to University of Pennsylvania and was at the Wharton School for 27 years before I retired early and went to Hong Kong as dean. I'm in the process now of returning later this year to the US, and in January, I was mentioning this to Harish. This is not public information yet, but I guess I can share it with you. In January, I'm going back to my alma mater to Stanford, where I'll be a fellow at the Distinguished Careers Institute. They invite about 25 leaders from all over the world to just come and think about what they want to do next and how they're going to serve humanity. And at this stage of my career, that's a good aim to have. So I'm returning to the US in a few months, back to California. The second point I would like to make is about the very special nature of Indian business schools, and many of you are leaders from this Indian business school industry. But the nature is special in a couple of different ways. On the one hand, your business schools, while they are very much Indian business schools, are really also part of the larger community of business schools all over the world. There are some features that you share, and there are some local circumstances that are different. But what is interesting about being part of the global community as well is that on the one hand, you face some of the same opportunities and challenges. They're not identical, but there's a similar set to the global business school industry. On the other hand, you're also part of the local Indian academic industry, and you face some of the challenges and opportunities that lie there. And here I'll just take a couple of minutes and talk to you about some of the problems that Indian academic institutions have. They apply in somewhat different ways to the business school industry, but there are some challenges there. Then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the challenges of Indian academic institutions, and this is part of what I might be able to bring to this audience, which may be different than other speakers. President Pranab Mukherjee, I have noted in recent years, has been talking a great deal about bemoaning, in fact, the reality that none of the Indian academic institutions features in the top 100 of the world. In some rankings, not even the top 250 in the world. You might ask, how does it matter? I suspect my colleague Harish Bhatt would probably agree with me if I were to say that this is absolutely a critical piece of the India story. And in my candid opinion, if we are unable to raise the level of the game in Indian universities and Indian business schools, the India story, which is getting so much positive attention in recent years, and deservedly so, will come to a sputtering halt in as little as 10 years. We need good people. I have talked with many leaders from industry. I think my good friend K.V. Kamath would not mind. I remember talking to him a few years ago when I was interviewing him as we wrote the book, The India Way, with some colleagues from Wharton. He said, most of the people that come out of the Indian university system, and frankly, the business schools, we find they're not ready for jobs at ICICI. And we have to actually retrain them. We cannot have this situation continue. I will give you comparisons, by the way, to Hong Kong and Singapore on one hand, and China on the other. They're all very different, but what you will find is that, remarkably enough, small city-states, Singapore with just over 5 million people, Hong Kong with over 7.5 million people, completely dominate India with 1.3 billion people. China, on the other hand, with about 1.5 billion, of course, also dominates India, not just in quantity, but also in quality. That's something to say. A very important piece of what I want to share is about the role of the Indian government. And one quick snapshot of where I'm going to go. It's very positive news, actually, that, for instance, yesterday the GST bill got passed. There is still work to be done. The other piece was the cabinet reshuffle some weeks earlier, at which I think I can say this in this audience, that you would probably be pleased that the former HRD minister has been replaced with a new HRD minister, and at least you won't have to worry about the set of problems you were dealing with earlier. Mr. Javadekar seems kind of a sensible person. At least he hasn't claimed as yet that he is a graduate from Yale University. Doing exec ed program, I might add, gently and very sort of kindly, is a little different than spending 4 years slogging on a PhD, which people like me did. So you're not quite an alum. So you have to carry a lot of water before you get to be called an alum, even of IIM Ahmedabad for that matter. This is a very critical role. I will appear rather critical of the Indian government, but quite frankly, this is a crucial piece, and some rethinking needs to be done. And I have been told by some friends that as and when I'm ready for it, they will introduce me to or give me an audience with Prime Minister Modi. And you know, I'm a big admirer of the work he has done and continues to do. And I'll be happy to share with him how we need to rethink how we run the education system in India. And finally, I will end with institution building, task that lies ahead for business schools, and some advice for business schools. This is a longish preamble, please forgive me. I'm quite badly jet lagged. I did not sleep well last night, but I'm gonna get into it. So let's start with the global business school industry. There are some similarities and some differences, and there are lessons to be learned. In North America, at least, the business school industry is mature. It is in the aggregate, it is even declining. The net result of what's happening, some of you are quite familiar with this, is that over the years, there had been a lot of buildup of capacity, provision of management education, and there is a tail. There is a left tail, which is the lowest in quality. There is a right tail at which the Harvard, Stanfords, Whartons of the world sit. The right tail is really not being influenced very much at all. They are very well consolidated. The top 10 positions, they might jostle around a little bit. They're unlikely to change for a number of reasons. However, the left tail is getting decimated. There are similarities in India and some differences. One difference is that the market may not be quite mature, quite the same way as North America or Europe for that matter, but it is still the case that there is a lot of overcapacity. The buildup that has occurred in India, what was the number, some 5, 6, 7,000 business schools? Clearly, there are many schools there. No offense to anyone, but clearly there are many business schools there that do not pass the quality cut. And the marketplace will take care of that, and there is going to be a shakeout. On the other side, there is also the challenge of being part of the Indian academic context. And here, I think the role of the government, while I fully believe that the senior most levels of government, whether they are the ministers or the prime minister or the prime minister's office or the president, and perhaps even the various ministries with the secretary level and the bureaucrats, let's give everyone the benefit of the doubt and say their intentions are the right intentions. I don't want to get into a debate on what are their intentions and questioning them. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But their actions have actually not always been very helpful. A very good example is the IIM bill, and some of what was going on was clearly unhelpful, and one would have to question, why is it that the government wants so much control over these institutions? I'm going to focus on the IIMs, but the issues are fairly similar for the IITs and more broadly for the universities as well, although at least the universities are under the UGC, and therefore some different regulations apply to them. Here is the problem. And the problem may be best illustrated by giving you the example of Hong Kong and of Singapore. At the undergraduate level, both the Hong Kong and Singapore government, and I was very privileged to be dean of Nanyang Business School in Singapore, which is one of the top business schools in Asia Pacific, and more recently of HKUST's business school, which is widely regarded as the #1 business school, all Asia Pacific, including India, and in fact, Africa, and other than INSEAD, it's ranked higher, in fact, than London Business School on many dimensions. Now, the government actually pays billions, this is with a B, not M, billions of dollars to these institutions, particularly at the undergraduate level, because they want to train the next generation of citizenry. They want a pool of qualified people who will enter the labor force at different levels. That's the future both of Singapore and of Hong Kong. The governments have done a great job of supporting the universities with serious amounts of resources. However, and this may surprise you, the government exercises virtually no control over these institutions. These institutions, in fact, are relatively autonomous. They are run by, in the case of Singapore, what is called the Board of Trustees. I used to work with them all the time from 2007 to 9. The leadership is largely chosen by the chairman of the Board of Trustees. The membership of the Board of Trustees is chosen by the Board of Trustees chairman and the other members. The only decision in which the government actually gets to have a say, they usually don't say no. The only decision is who will be the chairman of the Board of Trustees. They want someone who has their trust. Typically, almost without exception, it is a very senior leader from the world of business, right? In my time, he went on to become a very good friend. It was the former chairman of Singapore Airlines, Koh Boon Hui, Singaporean Chinese. He was then chairman of DBS Bank, which is the largest bank in Singapore, and he has since stepped down from those roles. In Hong Kong, in a similar manner, there is a body called the University Council. The chief executive of Hong Kong, in fact, gets to have a say in who will be the chairman of the council. However, the chairman's name is nominated by the council itself and by former chairman, vice chairman. Typically, former vice chairman become the new chairman. Once again, the government is giving billions of dollars, but in fact has no say in the running of the institution. The decisions lower down, the appointment of the president, the appointment of the provost, or the appointment of the dean, as in my case, the government has very little say. It's all done by the council of the university. By contrast, I think this is where there are lessons to be learned. By contrast, we will see what the final version of the IIM bill will be. I'm told it has undergone many revisions and is going in the right direction, so I'm optimistic. However, in contrast, the approach that is frequently taken by the powers that be in various arms of the Indian government is quite different. I understand, I see leaders, former leaders of the IIM, Ahmedabad at least, in the audience. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Ahmedabad and Bangalore in particular have taken any money from the government in recent years. Am I right? What is very interesting, I'm drawing the parallel between Singapore and Hong Kong and India. The locus standi seems to be, we gave you money at one time in the past, as if the inevitable conclusion is, therefore you will be beholden to us forever. I don't follow that logic. Singapore and Hong Kong, by contrast, are still giving billions of dollars, and in fact are saying the issue is not having control and micromanagement of all the details. The issue is we want you to be accountable, and we want you to be responsible for the running of the institution. We will hold you to account. That is fine. as good as IIM Ahmedabad is, and as loyal an alum as I am, I think this institution can still go higher, but the government has to play the right kind of role. And the role is create the playing field, set the regulatory contest, and kindly, please, get out of the way. Let people be responsible, bring alums like Harish Bhatt over, let them sit on the board of governors, I think it's called, at IMA, and have the responsibility and accountability. Autonomy does not mean you're ducking accountability. In fact, the formula for creating the world-class institutions is great autonomy, great accountability, and non-interference. That's the direction in which we need to go. What I have just said applies equally strongly to the IITs, applies equally strongly to the universities. I would simply say, with all humility, I have learned a few things being out on the global stage for the last 4 decades, being at the best institutions in the world. This is how they are run all over the world. This is not a domain where we can say, no, this is India. Yahan pe alag tarah se baat hoti hai. It doesn't work. This is exactly the same. We've got to do the right thing, or else be very clear that we will not be able to reach world class, world stage, world beaters. The juxtaposition of the president on one side saying, oh, this is terrible that we don't have world-class institutions, and the hassles and the haggles over the IIM bill, this, unfortunately, I don't get. I'm a reasonably smart guy, but I just don't understand this. This doesn't work. Let me go into one micro detail at least, because it's really very important. And I say this with the greatest affection, respect, and sympathy for all of you who are running these institutions, some of you who might be faculty members. One of the difficulties that has got created precisely because of this micro-intervention by the government or different arms of the government, the ministries or the bureaucracy, is that not only is this problem of authority and responsibility and who is autonomous to what extent, who's running what, there's also kind of too much involvement in the micro details of decisions. Not only who will be the chairman of the board of governors, I understand a recommendation was made by the appointed committee of 3 names which have been duly turned down by the powers that be. I don't understand this. This is not a positive move. There is also very strong say, although there has been pushback, and I'm very proud that Ahmedabad and Bangalore seem to be leading this pushback. It is the right thing to do. There's even this ongoing argument now for decades about, so how much should faculty at the IIMs be paid? Quite frankly, go and look at the model of Hong Kong and Singapore again. The government has zero say in this decision. And this is the right way to go. Why? Because talent that IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta, all the other business schools in this audience, the talent that you would want to attend is actually a global, that you would want to bring to your institution. This is a global talent pool. This is a talent pool that is shared very broadly and with virtually no borders all across the English-speaking world. These people, men and women, can go to the United States, they can go to Canada, they can go to the UK, different parts of the UK, they can go to parts of Europe. There are business schools in Switzerland, in France, increasingly in Germany, all of Scandinavia, Holland, which are actually English-speaking schools. They can go to Hong Kong, they can go to Singapore. Interestingly enough, this may surprise you, they can go to large chunks of mainland China. All the main business schools, Tsinghua, Beida, Shanghai Jiaotong, Zhejiang, Xi'an Jiaotong, all of them are hiring English speakers because they want to ramp up the level of their faculty. They can go to Japan. Japan is starting to do this. They can go to Korea. They can go to all of Southeast Asia. There are sort of lower ranked schools in Malaysia and other places. Indonesia, all those countries are open. They can go to Australia, they can go to New Zealand. And I'm sure I've left out a number of countries. They can go to Latin America. They can go to Brazil. They can go to Argentina. They can go to Chile. They can go to Mexico. Now, much as someone of Indian origin would truly love to be here, and those of you that have chosen academic careers clearly are ideologically driven. That's why you made the choice that you made. At the end of the day, people do have economic interests. There's nothing wrong with that. The real unintended consequence, but for people in the audience who are obviously in the careers they are in for ideological reasons, they said, I'll make a sacrifice. My good friend MR is a great example of this. Came back from the US, said, no, I'm going to be in India because I want to contribute to India. Why should people have to make a sacrifice? Do we demand this of people in the business world? No. No, in fact, one of the interesting consequences, Harish can verify this for me, one of the interesting consequences of the opening up of the Indian economy since 1991 has been precisely this, that the top level compensation of Indian executives is, if not entirely on par with the highest in the world, it's globally benchmarked now. So it's not at all unusual for corporate leaders to be making millions and millions of US dollars a year. That's what the labor market does. Now, as long as the government has its hand in deciding how much someone can be paid, and even if there are creative ways of raising money from industry to pay a faculty member more, and you have to fight it every step of the way, it's a move in the wrong direction. And frankly, it is irrelevant how much money a secretary makes in a particular ministry. The question is, do you want world-class academic institutions or not, including business schools? If you do, you're going to have to enter the global market. Now, I'm not sure if this is even a politic thing to do or a diplomatic thing to do, but I will tell you that at the upper end, because I have hired these faculty members myself, this might shock you, to get really world-class professors in finance or accounting, I have paid in Singapore and in Hong Kong 500, 600, 650, even 700,000 US dollars. That is the global market. And the reality is, there is so much Indian talent that is largely sitting in North America, mostly in the United States. People would be back in India in a heartbeat, right? All of us love India. I'm now, of course, in a different stage of career. I am thinking about what I might do next. But for younger people, you know, they have families, they have children, they are still looking to make their careers. Why should they be thinking about, if I can come to India, it's only at the expense of making a great sacrifice to my own economic future? The government needs to get out of this business. We want world-class institutions. One final thing would be, and this might not be a very popular thing to mention, one final thing would be, let us have the confidence that we had in 1991 when we opened the business side of things. My good friend Rahul Bajaj was one of the key leaders of the Bombay Club, said, no, we want things to be closed. Later on, in private conversations at least, he has said to me, you know what, I was wrong. I don't think he said this publicly, privately. I was wrong. I was wrong in the following way. I did not think that our corporate, our stock of best Indian companies, very good examples from the Tata Group, by the way, Tata Steel, Tata Motors, that they would ramp up to world class as quickly as they did. And frankly, the companies that went out of business, many of them did. They didn't survive 1991. They weren't really creating enough value, and the leadership was not of the quality that deserved to play a role in India going forward. Let's open up the education industry. There will be a part of the tail will get wiped out. I happen to believe that the best business schools in India have the talent, and if you let the inputs, for instance, let faculty salaries go with the global labor market, the best institutions will in fact go to 1 or 2 levels higher and be able to compete with the best in the world. I'm reminded of the example, many of you will be old enough to remember Indian Airlines in the old days. Same thing happened in the airline industry. My timer is saying that I'm done. Okay. The airline industry today or the television industry today would not be what it is unless the marketplace had been opened up. It's the only way to raise the level of competition, raise the level of capability. Enough said about the government. Let me close with just a couple of minutes on the institution building task ahead and my advice to aspiring business schools in India. I think one thing we cannot escape is if we want to build great academic institutions, including great business schools, this takes money. I know that in recent years, in fact, a lot of good work has been done by the corporate sector. In fact, we have these CSR responsibilities now, so more and more will continue to step up to the plate. The important thing is, let me just again give you some data. My good friend Nitin Noria is the Dean of Harvard Business School. I remember talking to him some time back and said, Nitin, what's your Harvard Business School's endowment? And he says, I don't remember. What is it? 10 billion, 12 billion, 15 billion? 1 billion is 6,700 crore rupees. And 10 billion would mean close to 70,000 crores. There is a reason why Harvard Business School, by many accounts, is the best business school in the world and will probably remain so unless there are some disasters. I don't think they will happen. It's too well governed, too well led, too well resourced. Stanford is in the region of $2 or $3 billion, 20,000 crores. Wharton is in the region of $1.5 to $2 billion. Interestingly, Singapore Management University, a new university, 1.5 billion Singapore dollars. Nothing to sneeze at. That's about, 10,000 crores or something. On the other side, I've had many conversations with Indian entrepreneurs who say, oh, by the way, we have a couple of acres of land and I have put aside 25 crores and I want to build a world-class business school. Yes, things are cheaper in India, but they're not that much cheaper. There's a mismatch between the input resources that are required to be world-class and, what people are willing to put up. And we're going to have to go in a different direction. There is a great deal of learning from China. If I had more time, and if you have time in the Q&A, I'll be happy to answer some questions about China. Unlike India, where, again, if I'm sounding overly critical of the government, please understand that this is coming from a place of great, great concern about what's happening in India and a great desire to help. We have sort of taken the step in India of opening many, many IIMs and many, many IITs. In my private conversations, at least, for instance, with the director of IIM Bangalore, I suspect it will be the same at Ahmedabad. Basically, these established institutions have been given charge of kind of making those other things happen. I don't know how this will work. They don't have enough faculty for their own needs. Suddenly they have a new set of demands coming from a new institution. The mistake, in my opinion, is setting up another IIT or IIM if you haven't thought through how you're going to deal with the paucity of input on the factor market side. For instance, where will the faculty come from? Unless you actually fix that problem, all you might end up doing 10 years out is essentially diluting the brand of all the IIMs. I don't know that this problem has really been thought through. China, by way of contrast, has many, many plans. There is a group called the C9. In a very sort of aspirational way, they call it the Chinese Ivy League. Tsinghua, Beida, Fudan, Shanghai Jiaotong, Zhejiang, Nanjing, Harbin, University of Science and Technology, Xi'an. I may have missed one name somewhere. And they are saying, we are going to put in tens of billions of US dollars into these 9 to begin with. And they will drag the others with them. It sounds very elitist. Interestingly, for a communist country like China, this is exactly what they're doing. They have another initiative 20 years old now called Project 985. May of 1998, it's been going on since then. They have another initiative called Project 211. I think that's from 2011, I think. And they have about 400 universities in 985 and about 39 universities in Project 211. And they are focusing on a few leaders. Opening new institutions is not the path that they are taking. Once again, we need to rethink this. Let me end with my advice to aspiring B schools. How do you go higher? All the problems being what they are. Here are some questions you might ask. Why are you different? The bottom line, if there's one message that I want to take away, you to take away from today, from my talk, is if you were to imitate IIM Ahmedabad, my beloved alma mater, as good as it is, the best that you will do if everything is absolutely perfect, which will be almost impossible, but even if you could pull that off, you will pull up alongside them. You will not get better than them. If you actually aspire to something better, which you should, I don't see why not, then you have to do something that is different. A Me Too strategy is not a superior strategy. You have to do something different. I understand there is need for the AACSB, the HKUST, the AMBA accreditations, the global accreditations. So you have to do some things that make you look like what business schools are supposed to look like. But there's a lot of room to differentiate. The key is you must have a differentiation strategy, differentiation in terms of faculty expertise, differentiation in terms of programs, differentiation in terms of format, differentiation in terms of the students. One of the reasons ISB worked, and MR can correct me if I'm wrong, is we made a strategy. I was part of the founding dean in the early years. I was part of the founding team, sorry, not the founding dean. I was offered the job in 2000, but I was unable to do it because I had young children then. They had a one-year MBA program, point of differentiation, somewhat older students with work experience, and the strategy actually worked. As a concrete example of this, the HKUST experience is useful. When I got there, I realized that, of course, they have a very fine MBA program, ranked as much as high as number 6 in the world in the FT rankings some years ago. Of course, they have a very fine EMBA program. This last year ranked number 2 in the world, ranked number 1 in the world 7 out of the last 10 years, higher than Wharton even. But the real interesting differentiation point is there's a portfolio of 8 MSc programs. And you will not believe this. I did not know this before I went there as dean. 95% of the talent is the best talent in mainland China. Literally the top 0.5 or 1.0% in all of China. They all come to Hong Kong. They want an English degree. They want an international qualification. They want to be in the global labor pool, not get a Chinese degree. This is a very interesting, important differentiation point for HKUST. And finally, this is something that I know some very good work is going on, as the workshop Amit just described from yesterday. It is very important to actually produce local knowledge. This is another key point I want you to focus on. We cannot just be consumers of knowledge that is created elsewhere. It should not be that some of the best research on India and Indian companies is being done in other countries, let's say particularly in the US at the leading institutions. Yes, I know there is some very good work happening in India, but we need much more of it. We need much more of it. And I would be willing to stick my neck out and say, any one of your institutions that takes a long-term strategy and says, 10 years out, we are going to be one of the top producers of some of the best knowledge about what's happening in India, whether it's the political scene, whether it's the consumer market in India. Harish is very interested in that. There are some very unique things in the Indian market. The world needs to know about this, and we are not doing enough. You might also pick some focus areas which are particularly important to India. E-commerce is booming. I saw it coming 10 years ago. Services continues to be very important. Yes, there's a lot of talk of we should be doing manufacturing like China. We will probably never catch up with China on the manufacturing side. Let's focus on our strengths. You don't lead from weakness, you lead from strength. Focus on the services. You know, there are 20, 25, 30 years behind China in that. But wonderful thing is, I landed at Mumbai International Airport a few days ago. My first trip back since the new airport was built. 20 years ago, I would have said, this is impossible in India. It can be done. It is being done. And I'm very proud to see that our airports increasingly are ranked among world-class airports. Infrastructure is easy to build. The real advantage that we have in the long term over countries like China is that we have done the really hard work of building the softer institutions. These, China may take 50 or 100 years, and it may never get there. Let's take advantage of those softer institutions. Anyway, those are just some thoughts. I hope you will find they raise some questions in your mind. Sorry if I appeared at all disjointed, but I am jet lagged and I didn't get to sleep too much last night, but pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.